The air in the room felt thick, humid with the scent of lilies and polite lies. It pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe, even before she spoke. I stood near the edge of the garden patio, glass of flat champagne forgotten in my hand, watching my sister glow under the fairy lights, accepting congratulations on her engagement. My mother, standing beside me, her smile plastered on for the guests circulating, leaned in close. Her voice was low, conspiratorial, meant only for me, but it cut through the festive chatter like broken glass. "Some women," she murmured, her eyes sweeping over me from my sensible shoes to my admittedly less than glamorous updo, "just aren't wife material." The world tilted. The laughter of the guests, the clinking of glasses, the soft string music, it all warped into a distorted hum in my ears. It wasn't just the words, it was the casual cruelty, the absolute certainty in her tone, the way she delivered it at my sister's moment of triumph, ensuring I felt maximum contrast to the golden girl of the hour. My breath hitched. My fingers tightened around the champagne flute, knuckles white. This wasn't the first time, of course. Not by a long shot. But here, now, with everyone watching or about to watch, it was a deliberate strike, aimed right at the softest part of me, leaving me exposed and bleeding in a dress I now suddenly hated. The lilies suddenly smelled cloying, suffocating. My smile felt like a brittle mask I was afraid would shatter, sending shards of humiliation everywhere. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. My life, up until that specific, gut-punching second, had felt stable. Good even. I had a job I didn't hate, an apartment that felt like home, and a partner, Liam, who saw me. Truly saw me. Not as the perpetually disappointing understudy to my dazzling sister, but as me. Capable, funny, sometimes messy, deeply feeling me. We'd built something quiet and strong together over the last 3 years. Talks about the future weren't hypothetical whispers anymore. They were solid things, plans taking shape. Marriage was on the horizon. We'd looked at rings together, talked about timelines, futures. I felt a sense of calm, purpose I'd never had before. For the first time, I felt like I was building my life on my terms, with someone who cherished those terms. But my mother had a script for my life, and I'd consistently failed to follow it. It involved traditional milestones met on a strict timeline, a certain type of career, ideally one that involved wearing pearls, and a partner who fit her very specific, very narrow definition of suitable. Liam, a kind, brilliant, slightly rumpled architect with a passion for old books and making me laugh until my sides hurt, did not fit that script. He wasn't wealthy, he wasn't from the right family, he certainly didn't wear pearls. He was simply good. And he loved me fiercely. That, apparently, wasn't enough. Not for her. My sister, Sarah, was the family's designated success story. She was everything my mother valued. Effortlessly beautiful, popular, engaged to a man with a pedigree and a trust fund. Her engagement party was the culmination of years of my mother's meticulous planning, a glittering, opulent affair designed to announce Sarah's perfect match to the world. And my role, as always, was supporting Claire, the quiet, slightly awkward older sister who hadn't quite figured things out yet. The one who still lived in a world that wasn't draped in silk and old money. So when she said those words in that hushed tone, it wasn't just a casual insult. It was a culmination of years of subtle jabs, disappointed sighs, and pointed comparisons. It was the sound of the ceiling she'd always placed over me, now reinforced and painted in stark, unforgiving black. It wasn't just that I wasn't married yet. It was that my fundamental nature, my choices, my very essence, disqualified me from ever achieving that status in a way she deemed worthy. Some women just aren't wife material, it echoed in the sudden, painful silence that had fallen over my private world, even as the party roared on around me. It felt like she was stamping "not good enough" onto my forehead with invisible ink. I wanted to lash out, to scream back that her definition of wife material was as shallow and fake as the smiles she exchanged with her society friends. I wanted to shatter that champagne flute, not just symbolically, but literally, letting the glass spray across her manicured hand. But years of training, of trying to avoid conflict, of desperately craving some sliver of her approval, kept me rooted to the spot. I forced the muscles in my face into a semblance of neutrality. I swallowed the hot, bitter taste of tears and humiliation. My chest felt hollowed out, a gaping wound where my heart used to be, now exposed to the chill of her words. "Excuse me," I managed, my voice thin and reedy, barely audible over the party din. I didn't wait for a response. I couldn't. I turned and walked, or perhaps stumbled, away from her, towards the relative anonymity of the drinks table. The garden blurred through the sudden moisture stinging my eyes. Each step felt heavy, weighted down by the shame she'd so effortlessly dumped on me. I could feel the heat rising on my neck, the flush of embarrassment I desperately tried to hide. I felt seen in the worst possible way, exposed as the failure she clearly believed me to be. I reached the table, my hand shaking as I reached for a glass of water, needing to wash the taste of her words out of my mouth. The ice rattled against the glass, a tiny, frantic sound in the vastness of the party. I gripped it tightly, grounding myself in the cold pressure against my palm. The air still felt too thin, the scent of lilies now oppressive, like funeral flowers. Every conversation around me felt like it was secretly about me, about my mother's whispered assessment, about my undeniable lack of material. It was irrational, I knew, but the feeling was potent, suffocating. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the manicured lawn and become one with the perfectly trimmed hedges, invisible and silent. The smiles on people's faces seemed mocking. The polite questions about my life felt like thinly veiled pity or judgment. Had my mother said it louder? Had others overheard? The paranoia gnawed at me, adding another layer to the exquisite discomfort. I nursed the water, trying to regain some semblance of control. My reflection in the glass was a pale, drawn stranger. Was she right? Was there something fundamentally wrong with me? Was I too independent, too outspoken, me? Was wife material some kind of mold I could never fit, a performance I was incapable of faking? The thought was a cold, creeping dread that wound itself around my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. All the hopes I'd built with Liam suddenly felt fragile, susceptible to her poisonous judgment. What if she was right? What if I wasn't good enough for him, or for anyone, in the ways that truly mattered? The doubt was a hungry monster, feeding on the insecurities she had carefully cultivated in me my entire life. The party continued its relentless, cheerful rhythm. Sarah laughed, a bright, bell-like sound, and my fiancé-to-be's face, illuminated by fairy lights and champagne, was a study in perfect happiness. He looked radiant, a princess in her moment. And I stood in the shadows, feeling like a gargoyle, out of place and out of time. I watched my mother glide effortlessly through the crowd, her mask firmly back in place, leaving the debris of her cruelty scattered behind her for me to navigate alone. The injustice of it burned. She could inflict this pain and then simply move on, leaving me to pick up the pieces of my composure in front of 100 smiling strangers. I saw a few people glance in my direction, and I quickly averted my gaze, pretending to be utterly fascinated by a distant rose bush. The heat on my neck intensified. I needed a way out, a quiet corner to breathe, and maybe let the tears fall where no one could see. The noise felt amplified, the polite chatter like nails on a chalkboard. Every laugh felt hollow, every clink of a glass a tiny hammer striking my raw nerves. This was supposed to be a celebration, a joyful family event, but for me, it had become an arena for my mother's subtle warfare, a reminder of my perceived failures. I felt utterly alone, isolated by her words even in a crowd of people I had known my entire life. The pressure was immense, forcing down on me, making me feel small and insignificant. Then, through the haze of my misery, I saw him. Liam. He was standing just inside the gate, pausing for a moment, looking around the crowded patio as if searching for someone.
Me.
My heart gave a lurch, a mix of surprise and a flicker of something else I couldn't quite name. He wasn't supposed to be here. He had a late meeting, he'd said. He'd send his regrets to my parents and catch up with me later. So, why was he here? A fresh wave of anxiety washed over me. Had something happened? Was he going to make a scene? My mother would die. And then she would kill me. My internal crisis deepened. His unexpected arrival, instead of offering immediate comfort, added another layer of apprehension to my already overloaded emotional state. I shrank back slightly, wanting to signal to him without anyone else noticing. Just don't make a fuss. Please, Liam, not now. He started walking towards the patio, navigating the clusters of guests with a polite nod and a careful sidestep. He was wearing the suit I loved, the one that always looked slightly too relaxed for him, the one that made him look less like a corporate architect and more like a charming university professor. He held something in his hand, keeping it low, tucked against his side. A small, dark box. My breath caught again, this time for a different reason. A small, dark box. The kind of box, no. Not here. Not now. It couldn't be. The timing was impossible. Horrific. Did he know what had just happened? Had he somehow sensed my distress? Or was this a terrible, wonderful coincidence? The uncertainty was agony. My eyes darted from Liam, steadily making his way through the crowd, to my mother, who was now deep in conversation with Sarah's future mother-in-law. I needed to intercept him. I needed to tell him to stop. To wait. This was Sarah's night. This was not the place. The thought of him proposing here, now, immediately after my mother's cruel pronouncement, in front of everyone, felt like a potential catastrophe of epic proportions. The sheer awkwardness, the stealing of Sarah's spotlight, the inevitable fury of my mother. It was a nightmare scenario. My palms started to sweat again. I pushed away from the drinks table, ready to rush towards him, to wave him off, to mouth a silent plea across the increasingly short distance between us. But it was too late. He was closer now, close enough for me to see the determined set of his jaw, the unusual sparkle in his eyes. He wasn't just walking towards me, he was walking towards them, towards my mother, towards Sarah. My steps faltered. My carefully constructed plan to intercept him dissolved. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking towards the center of the patio, where the happy couple and my parents formed a small, radiant nucleus of celebration. A knot of icy dread formed in my stomach. What was he doing? What could he be doing? The small box in his hand seemed to pulse with a hidden significance, drawing my gaze, holding my attention captive. As he got closer, people started to notice. A ripple went through the small clusters he passed. Who was this man heading straight for the bridal party? A few heads turned. My mother, mid-sentence, her face a picture of polite, aristocratic interest, paused. Her eyes followed the direction of the subtle shift in attention. And then she saw him. Liam. Her smile flickered. A brief, almost imperceptible ripple of annoyance. Oh, it was him. The architect. She'd met him before, of course, a few stiff, formal encounters where she'd made her disapproval clear through pursed lips and carefully worded questions about his prospects. She didn't approve. Not at all. Her expression tightened, just slightly, the polite mask cracking. She began to turn, ready, I could tell, to offer a cool nod of acknowledgement, perhaps a brief, dismissive exchange before turning back to more important company. But then she saw the box. Her eyes, which had held a flicker of annoyance, widened. Not just widened, but snapped open, fixing on the small object in Liam's hand with an intensity that was startling. The color began to drain from her face, slowly at first, then with an alarming speed, leaving her skin a pale, ashen gray under the fairy lights. Her conversation partner's words faded into the background, unheard. Her gaze was locked on Liam, on the box. Her hand, which had been resting delicately on Sarah's arm, trembled and fell away. Sarah looked confused, following her mother's sudden shift in attention. My father, standing beside my mother, also turned, his brow furrowed in mild curiosity turning to concern as he took in his wife's sudden, dramatic pallor. Liam stopped a few feet away from the group, facing my parents and Sarah. He offered a polite, almost formal nod. My mother was frozen, utterly, completely still, except for that hand, still trembling slightly at her side. Her eyes were wide, fixed, filled with something I couldn't immediately decipher. Fear? Disbelief? Horror? A cold, prickling sensation began to spread across my scalp. Something profound and unexpected was happening. My earlier dread about him proposing faded, replaced by a growing sense of bewilderment and a strange, nascent curiosity. This wasn't going the way I'd feared. It was going somewhere else entirely. Somewhere I couldn't predict. The silence around their small group grew, palpable, drawing the attention of more guests. Conversations sputtered and died. A hush began to fall over the patio, spreading outwards from the center like a ripple. All eyes were now on Liam, on my mother's ashen face, on the small box held carefully in his hand. My sister, Sarah, looked from Liam to her mother, then back to Liam, a look of increasing alarm on her face. Her own moment of triumph was being interrupted, hijacked by this strange, silent confrontation. Liam didn't speak immediately. He just stood there, meeting my mother's fixed, wide-eyed gaze. There was a quiet strength in his posture, a calm resolve that I hadn't seen in him before, not directed towards my family. He wasn't rumpled architect Liam. He was Liam, my rock, standing firm against the tide of their disapproval. My mother's breathing seemed to quicken, shallow, ragged gasps that were barely audible but visible in the slight tremor of her shoulders. Her eyes darted from the box to Liam's face, then back to the box, a frantic, desperate search for understanding or perhaps denial. Then, slowly, deliberately, Liam raised the small box. He held it out, not towards me, but towards my mother. My mother's jaw dropped open. A small, choked sound escaped her lips, a sound of utter, complete shock, raw and undignified. It was the sound of something precious being snatched away, of a carefully constructed reality crumbling before her eyes. Her hand flew to her mouth, fingers splayed, as if to contain the raw emotion threatening to spill out. Her eyes were no longer just wide, they were glazed with disbelief, fixated on the box. Liam flipped the lid open. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark velvet, was a ring. It was magnificent. A single, impossibly bright diamond, set in a delicate platinum band, surrounded by smaller stones that caught the fairy lights and splintered them into 1,000 tiny rainbows. It wasn't just any ring. It was the ring. The one I knew instantly, the one my mother had obsessed over for years. It was the Harrington ring. My great-grandmother's engagement ring. An heirloom, passed down through the female line, always intended for the eldest daughter. A ring my mother had guarded jealously, a symbol of family legacy and status, promising it one day to Sarah. She had shown it to Sarah recently, I knew, parading its history and value, making it clear that this was the standard, this was the kind of history and significance that mattered. And she had explicitly, implicitly, always made it clear that I, the one who wasn't wife material, would never be worthy of such a piece of history. I had heard whispers, seen the way she looked at it, known it was destined for Sarah, the golden child, the one who would carry on the right kind of legacy. It was a piece of the family history I felt utterly disconnected from, locked away behind velvet and my mother's judgment. And here it was, in Liam's hand, presented not to Sarah, not even initially to me, but held out for my mother to see. My mother made a noise that was somewhere between a gasp and a strangled sob. Her face crumpled. The polished veneer of the society hostess shattered, revealing the raw, furious, devastated woman beneath. How did you get that?" she whispered, her voice trembling uncontrollably. It wasn't a question of curiosity. It was an accusation, laced with pure, unadulterated horror. Liam's gaze finally shifted, finding mine across the silent, stunned crowd. A faint, knowing smile touched his lips. Then he looked back at my mother. His voice was calm, clear, cutting through the heavy silence like a bell. "Mrs. Harrington," he said, using her formal name, making it sound almost surgical. You said some women aren't wife material. He paused, letting the weight of her earlier words hang in the air, audible only to her, and now, to me, a devastating echo. The plot twist was unfolding, not with a bang, but with a quiet, deliberate unveiling. He was countering her cruelty with a move she had never anticipated, using the very symbol of her expectations and control against her. The power was shifting, subtly but irrevocably, from her shaking hands to his steady ones. He turned fully then, towards me, the box still open, the ring glittering. He walked the final few steps, reaching me where I stood, rooted to the spot, a mixture of shock, exhilaration, and sheer disbelief coursing through me. My mother watched him, her eyes wide, her mouth agape, utterly blindsided. Her planned narrative for the evening, for my life, was dissolving before her eyes. The ring she had coveted, the symbol of the legacy she was so desperate to protect and pass down the right way, was not going to her perfect daughter, presented by a suitable suitor. It was coming to me, presented by the man she deemed unworthy. Liam stood in front of me. He took my free hand, the one not clutching the water glass. His hand was warm, steady, a lifeline in the swirling chaos. He didn't need to get down on one knee. The world had already stopped. His eyes, kind and steady, looked into mine. "And I say," he said, his voice softer now, meant just for me, but still carrying enough weight to be heard in the stunned silence, "that you are the only woman I want to be my wife." He didn't explicitly mention the ring's history. He didn't need to. The mother's reaction was the punchline. Her face, a mask of horror and defeat, said it all. She stared at the ring, then at me, then at Liam, her eyes darting back and forth as if trying to find a glitch in the reality unfolding before her. Her plot, her careful control, her dismissive judgment, it had all culminated in this moment, not of my humiliation, but of her spectacular, public undoing. The object of her desire, the symbol of her legacy, was now in the hands of the person she deemed least worthy, being offered to the daughter she had just declared unfit. The irony was brutal, precise. He took the ring from the box, its cold weight grounding as he slipped it onto my finger. It fit perfectly. The Harrington ring. On my hand. The weight of years of judgment, of feeling like the less than, the one who didn't measure up, seemed to lift, replaced by a surge of pure, triumphant vindication. It wasn't just a proposal. It was a reclamation. A statement. A quiet, devastating victory won not through shouting or pleading, but through quiet love and a partner who saw my worth and was willing to challenge the very foundations of my mother's prejudice. The sound slowly returned, a murmur from the crowd, hushed whispers, confused glances. My sister, Sarah, her face a mixture of shock and, was that hurt or surprise? My father stood utterly still, his face unreadable. But my mother, she was still frozen, her hand still covering her mouth, her eyes wide and vacant, fixed on the ring on my finger. The air around her seemed to vibrate with suppressed fury and humiliation. She had wanted that ring for Sarah, a symbol of her successful, traditional future. She had held it up, a glittering prize, out of my reach. And now it was mine, given to me by the man she had dismissed, in the very place she had tried to diminish me. The betrayal she felt, though entirely of her own making through her possessiveness and judgment, was clear on her face. This wasn't just me getting engaged. It was me getting engaged with her precious symbol of legacy, bypassing her carefully laid plans, delivered by the very person she disdained. She was blindsided because she was so convinced of my inability and her control. She never imagined I would find a partner who understood the game and was willing to play it, let alone win it using her own pieces. It wasn't just karma. It was strategic, devastating counterplay. The victim hadn't just survived. She had thrived, acquiring the very prize the betrayer held dearest, right in front of her eyes. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken words and raw emotion. My mother finally lowered her hand. Her eyes, when they met mine, were cold, hard, stripped of any pretense of maternal affection. There was no joy for me, no congratulations. Only a simmering rage. A silent accusation.
How dared I?
How dared Liam? Well, she said, her voice rough, strained, forcing the word out. It hung in the air, heavy with disapproval. She didn't congratulate me. She didn't acknowledge Liam. She simply turned away, a stiff, brittle figure, and walked back towards her conversation partner, forcing a strained smile back onto her face. But the mask was broken now. Everyone had seen. Everyone knew. Sarah stood there awkwardly for a moment, offering me a small, tentative smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, before following our mother. My father gave me a brief, almost imperceptible nod that might have been approval, or might have just been resignation, before turning back to the party. The perfect family tableau had been shattered. Liam turned me slightly, so we were facing each other fully, away from the immediate fallout. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. I couldn't wait, he murmured, his thumb gently stroking the back of my hand. And I wanted to make sure you knew how I feel, in case anyone else had
Doubts.
He knew.
Of course he knew.
Maybe not the exact words, but he knew the dynamic. He knew her. He had orchestrated this, not out of malice, but out of fierce love and a protective instinct to shield me from her constant chipping away at my self-worth. He had seen the pain she inflicted and decided, in that moment, to deliver a counterblow so unexpected and powerful that it would shift the axis of our relationship with her forever. He hadn't just asked me to marry him. He had declared war on her judgment, using the most potent weapon available, the very symbol of the status and lineage she held above all else. Walking through the party after that was surreal. The air was different. People approached us cautiously, offering congratulations, but their eyes flickered towards my mother, towards Sarah, measuring the reactions, sensing the seismic shift that had just occurred. Some offered genuine warmth, others polite, curious smiles. I held my head high, the ring on my finger a tangible weight, a silent rebuttal to years of negativity. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was standing in the light, claimed, cherished, chosen. By someone who saw the real me and declared her wife material in the most public, undeniable way possible. My mother avoided me for the rest of the evening. I saw her watching me from across the patio, her expression cold and distant. The bridge between us, already fragile, felt like it had just been blown to smithereens. There was a pang of sadness, a mourning for the relationship that would never be what I'd always secretly longed for, a mother's unconditional love and acceptance. But that sadness was overshadowed by the fierce, exhilarating feeling of freedom. Her words, her judgment, no longer had the power they once did. They had been countered by a love strong enough to take on her carefully constructed world and win. We left the party earlier than planned. The celebratory music faded behind us as we walked out into the cool night air, the distant sound of laughter feeling miles away. The silence in the car was comfortable, filled with the quiet buzz of adrenaline and the weight of the moment. Liam drove, his hand finding mine, his fingers lacing through mine, warm and reassuring. The ring felt cool and smooth against my skin. "How did you get the ring?" I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper.
He squeezed my hand.
"Your father," he said simply. "I went to him a few weeks ago, asked for his blessing. Told him I wanted to ask you. I knew he had the Harrington ring. He told me your mother wanted Sarah to have it. Said he always thought it should go to the eldest. Said he thought you deserved it. That you're the one who keeps things together, the one who understands what family really means, even when she makes it hard. He said he'd help me. It wasn't easy getting it from her, apparently. Had to find a moment when she wasn't looking, swap it with a paste copy, for a few hours. He didn't want to do it this way, the public nature of it. Said he hoped I wasn't planning anything dramatic. But I told him, after what I overheard her say to you last Christmas about my family, and seeing how she treats you, I wasn't going to let her diminish you anymore. Not in front of everyone she cares about impressing. Not on Sarah's night, right after she'd put you down. I wanted everyone to see you, right then, radiant and chosen, with that on your finger." I wanted her to see it. My throat tightened. My father, the quiet man who rarely interfered, who always seemed to defer to my mother. He had seen. He had understood. And he had chosen me. Chosen us. The complexity of the moment deepened. It wasn't just a victory over my mother. It was an unexpected alliance, a quiet act of rebellion from within the family structure itself. The road ahead felt uncertain, fraught with the inevitable backlash from my mother, the awkwardness with my sister, the shifting dynamics within my family. But as I looked at Liam, at the steady confidence in his profile illuminated by the dashboard lights, and felt the cool weight of the Harrington ring on my finger, a symbol now transformed from one of lineage and control into one of love and quiet defiance, I knew we would face it together. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time, I had armor, solid and shining, forged in love and standing beside me. The woman my mother said wasn't wife material was about to become a wife, on her own terms, with a legacy she earned not through birthright, but through resilience and love. The victory felt cold, yes, tinged with the sadness of what it cost, but undeniably, profoundly mine. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.